Princess had everything: wealth, a thriving business, and a generous heart. She had built an empire from the ground up, turning her family's struggling investment firm into a multi-million-dollar powerhouse. She had homes in the best neighborhoods, drove the finest cars, and had connections with the most influential people in the city. But what was wealth without love? That was the lie she told herself when she met Richard. He had nothing but good looks and charm, but Princess saw potential. Where others saw a man without direction, she saw someone who just needed a little push. He just needs time, she had told Rachel over dinner one evening, after her best friend had voiced concerns. Rachel had sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. Princess, love is one thing, but you can't build a future on potential. He's got to show something real. Princess brushed it off. She was in love. She married Richard 6 months later, convinced that she had found a man who would stand beside her as she continued to build her empire. She spent the next 5 years convincing herself she hadn't made a mistake. Richard never lifted a finger to contribute to their life together. While Princess worked late nights, sealing high-profile deals and making strategic business moves, Richard spent his days living off her success. He dabbled in different business ventures, none of which lasted. He bought expensive suits, leased luxury cars, and dined in the most exclusive restaurants, all on her dime. But the worst part, he was emotionally absent. Princess had dreamed of a marriage where love was more than just a title, where a husband would be her partner, her safe space. Instead, she found herself in a marriage where she gave and gave, while Richard took without a second thought. Rachel saw it. Princess, this man is a leech. He's using you. Rachel, you don't understand. No, you don't understand. Love isn't supposed to feel this empty. But Princess had already convinced herself that keeping the marriage mattered more than happiness. If Richard's lack of ambition was painful, his indifference towards starting a family was worse. Princess wanted a child more than anything. They tried, again and again. But every pregnancy ended the same way. In heartbreak, she blamed herself. Maybe I wasn't meant to be a mother. Rachel had been there for every loss, every appointment, every whispered confession in the dead of night. You are meant to be a mother, Princess. Some things just take time, but time ran out when the doctor gave her the final blow. If you try again, it could cost you your life. Princess sat frozen in the doctor's office, clutching the thin hospital gown around her body. She knew what had to be done. It was time to consider surrogacy. Princess expected Richard to resist the idea. But when she brought it up over dinner that night, he barely reacted. "Fine," he said, cutting into his steak. "If that's what you want." Princess frowned. "That's it? No arguments?" "I already said I was fine with it." He scrolled through his phone. "Just do what you need to do." Something about his lack of interest bothered her, but she had other things to worry about. Finding a surrogate wasn't easy. Princess didn't trust strangers with something so important. One night, as she poured her heart out to Rachel over drinks, her best friend said something unexpected. "Let me do it." Princess stared at her. "Rachel, this is a huge decision." Rachel smiled. "I know, but you're my best friend. If I can help you become a mother, why wouldn't I?" Princess's throat tightened. "You'd really do that for me?" Rachel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Always." Princess was overwhelmed with gratitude. She had no idea she was about to walk into the biggest betrayal of her life. The first months of the surrogacy process were a blur for Princess. She was focused on the logistics, the endless paperwork, and the whirlwind of medical appointments. She barely had time to breathe, let alone question anything. Rachel, as promised, became her surrogate, and Princess couldn't have been more grateful. Her best friend was carrying her child, her longed-for miracle, and the thought of it filled her with hope. For the first time in years, Princess felt like something was finally going right. Richard, though, was distant. He didn't show the same excitement that Princess had expected. At first, she chalked it up to his usual apathy, telling herself he'd warm up as the pregnancy progressed. But as the weeks turned into months, it became harder to ignore the small signs that something was off. Rachel had already moved into Princess's guest house, just a few doors down from the main residence, where she would be more comfortable throughout the pregnancy. The arrangement seemed perfect on paper. Rachel would be nearby, cared for, and supported, while Princess continued with her demanding work schedule. However, during one of their late-night conversations, Rachel casually mentioned how much she missed having Richard around. Princess froze. "You miss him?" Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I just feel like he's been a little distant, that's all. He hasn't really been around much." Princess felt a sting, but she dismissed it. He's probably just adjusting to the idea of becoming a father. But as the weeks went by, Richard's indifference didn't change. He rarely showed up to doctor's appointments, rarely asked about the pregnancy, and barely acknowledged Rachel unless he had to. Instead, he was preoccupied with his own pursuits, his business ventures, his leisure time, his growing list of contacts. Princess, still caught up in her own world of trying to become a mother, ignored it. She told herself it was temporary, that Richard would come around. Then came the subtle whispers. It wasn't just Rachel's casual comments anymore. One evening, after a long day at work, Princess came home to find Richard and Rachel sitting together on the back patio. Their laughter echoed in the quiet evening air as they shared a bottle of wine. Princess paused at the door, watching them through the glass. Something about the scene didn't sit right with her. They were too close, too comfortable. She had never seen Richard so relaxed around anyone except her. And Rachel? Well, Rachel had always been the one person who could read Richard like a book. But tonight, there was something different in the way they interacted. Their voices were softer, their gestures more intimate. Princess shook the feeling off. She had nothing to worry about, right? But the more she tried to reassure herself, the more her intuition screamed at her to look closer. As Rachel's pregnancy advanced, something else began to shift. Rachel's growing attachment to the child. At first, it was just small things. The way Rachel would rub her belly, the soft smile that played on her lips when she talked about the baby. But as the months went by, Princess noticed it getting more intense. Rachel seemed to be emotionally tethering herself to the baby in a way that felt wrong. One afternoon, Princess walked into the guest house unannounced and found Rachel sitting on the couch, cradling her stomach protectively. Her eyes were shut, and she seemed lost in thought. Princess cleared her throat. "You okay?" Rachel quickly opened her eyes, startled. "Oh, yeah. Just tired." Princess raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. It was a strange moment, but nothing more. Still, it lingered in her mind like a shadow she couldn't shake off. Later that night, as they sat in the living room together, Princess brought it up casually. "You've been so focused on the baby lately. Are you sure you're okay?" Rachel glanced at her nervously, then quickly smiled. "I'm fine, Princess. Just really excited. This is your baby after all." But the hesitation in Rachel's voice, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, made Princess uneasy. It wasn't until much later that the pieces finally began to fall into place. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Princess stumbled across an email on Richard's phone, an email addressed to a surrogacy agency. Her breath caught in her throat as she read through the message, which spoke about arrangements for a surrogate pregnancy. At first, she assumed it was a communication from the agency they had already hired. But when she noticed the date, her heart sank. The email was dated several months ago, before Rachel had agreed to carry the baby. In the email, Richard had inquired about the details of the surrogacy process, specifically asking about what would happen if the surrogate decided she wanted to keep the child. Princess felt sick. Her mind raced. Was this some sort of scheme Richard had set in motion long before they'd even talked about surrogacy? Had he been planning this with someone else? She confronted him immediately. "Richard, what's this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Richard's expression flickered with momentary panic before he quickly masked it with indifference. "It's nothing, Princess. Just some old research. It's irrelevant." But something in his eyes told her it was more than that. Princess's heart ached as she replayed that conversation over and over. She felt the walls closing in. Her gut told her something was terribly wrong. And then came the final straw. She overheard Richard and Rachel arguing late one night. "You're getting too attached, Rachel. You can't act like this is your baby." Richard's voice was low but forceful. "I'm not just going to forget about it. This baby is mine too, Richard. You know I can't just let go." Princess stood frozen outside the door, her hands shaking as she heard Rachel's words. "What do you mean, mine too?" she whispered to herself. Something clicked in her mind. Was Rachel in love with Richard? Had she crossed a line she couldn't uncross? And was this entire surrogacy just a twisted game they had been playing all along? The next day, Princess demanded the truth. She demanded to know everything she had been blind to. The truth finally surfaced, and it was uglier than Princess could have imagined. Months of suspicion, subtle signs, and an unsettling feeling had led her to confront Richard and Rachel. She'd asked them point blank, "What's going on?" Rachel, with tears streaming down her face, couldn't deny it any longer. "Princess, I never wanted to hurt you, but it was never your eggs," she confessed, voice barely above a whisper. "Richard and we slept together. I got pregnant, not from the surrogacy. It was us." Princess's heart stopped. She staggered backward, her world shifting beneath her feet. She had trusted Rachel like a sister, believed Richard was her partner, but they had both betrayed her in the worst way possible. Richard, caught in the lie, tried to defend himself, but Princess couldn't bear to hear it. "You've been lying to me this entire time," she cried, her voice breaking. "All this time, I thought I was building a family, but you were tearing it apart. I never meant for this to happen," Richard said, his words hollow. I don't know what went wrong." "No," Princess snapped, shaking her head. "You knew exactly what you were doing. Both of you did." Rachel stood there, guilty and broken, but it wasn't enough. Her apology couldn't erase the damage done. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the pain in Princess's eyes said everything Rachel needed to know. The trust was gone. Princess looked at both of them, her heart a mess of betrayal, rage, and hurt. "How could you do this to me?" she asked, barely able to keep her voice steady. "You were both supposed to be the people I trusted most. You both betrayed me in the worst way." Rachel reached out, but Princess pulled away. "No, Rachel, don't touch me." Richard stood silent, unable to explain his actions. The man who had never worked, never cared, never loved her in the way she had imagined. He had taken her love and turned it into something ugly. "It's over," Princess said, turning to leave. "I can't stay here anymore." She didn't care where she went. All that mattered was leaving behind a life full of lies. She packed her things quickly, not sparing a single glance at the home that once felt like a sanctuary. In the car, she drove away, her eyes blurry with tears. She didn't know if the child Rachel carried was Richard's or someone else's. It didn't matter. What mattered was the life she had lost, the future she had imagined crumbling away in an instant. She couldn't look at Richard anymore. She couldn't look at Rachel. They were no longer her family, no longer her friends. She didn't know who to trust anymore. She pulled up to a hotel, alone, exhausted, and broken. The world outside seemed distant, like she was watching it through a foggy window. All she had was her name and the ruins of a life she was still trying to understand. She couldn't return to Richard, to Rachel. She had to start over, whatever that meant.